I don't understand the sorrow, but you're calming in the storm. Sometimes this weight is overwhelming, but I don't carry it alone. You're still close when I can't feel you. I don't have to be afraid. And though my eyes have never seen you, I've seen enough to say I know that you are good. I know that you are kind. I know that you are so much more than what I leave behind. I know that I know that I am safe. 'Cause even if I had to live this crazy darkest day, I know that you are on my darkest day, from my deepest pain. Through it all, my heart chose to sing your praise. On my darkest day, in my deepest pain. Through it all, my heart chose to sing your praise. I know that you are good. I know that you are kind. I know that you are so much more than what I leave behind. I know that I'm loved. I know that I am safe. Even in the fire to live is Christ, to die is gain. I know that you are good.
This is just awesome. It's really awesome, and it's because I didn't write it. Ray Ortlund wrote this. Check this out. This is what he had to say, and I hope this encourages you today. With Jesus, there is more to you than you. God has given himself to you, and he's writing your story into his story with his grace as the truth of it all. So that means even if your story is one that you don't want to own it, well, okay, I understand, but God is writing his story through your story, and that means it's not the end of the story. So hang in there. It's the message. It's Sirius XM.
So she cried in herself.
No, her friend, Lord Polly.
God, that's the name.
Drove it together with John's sled. It's been back about, I guess, 10 o'clock last night. Sierra, I think she's coming back in December 10th, she said. She'll be here for 4 months.
How's everybody doing this morning?
Great.
Good to see you all. As we was talking earlier, the sun looks good out there, don't it?
Yes.
And I think all the leaves will be off now. A lot of wind.
Yeah.
Do we have a spoken prayer request before we get started this morning?
Hate to say it, but
Okay, Steve.
sweet Steve.
He did.
I'm just gonna say, I hate to say it, but this afternoon, it's not looking good.
No.
Continue to remember me and my family. Remember my two brothers. Remember my neighbors who can receive. I got a special one spoken up with.
Okay. Any others?
Also, I asked you to remember Michael Street, Margaret's son.
Remember Matt and Jacqueline still, they're traveling this morning, been over to see his granny that's pretty, not doing too well at all, so remember them and still remember the baby, and she had a good visit, so I wanna thank the Lord for
Good.
that.
Yeah. John Davis.
Yes, I'd like you to remember some friends, coworkers of mine that having some health issues. Remember my dad, and remember some family that may be here this morning. The Lord has stirred up our little bit.
Any others? Oh, just be mindful of our services today and just ask for God's will and way be done here. And all that's said, just, pray for our lesson this morning, and he gives us, we want, what can we glean from his word this morning? That we be edified, that we gain knowledge, that we be drawn closer, That's what we want to have happen, right?
Amen.
And at the same time, just be thankful. Let's be thankful this morning for, there is a lot of needs. You all voiced them here already, but isn't there a lot to be thankful for?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So let's be mindful of that this morning. And I'll ask you to stand. Ronnie, if you'd lead us out, please.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, I come to you this morning with this topic of this before us, Lord. Lord, many requests from you, Lord, I pray God, save each and every one of us in consideration, Lord. Lord, you can handle it, Lord, you can see fit, Lord. Lord, I just pray God for the service today. I pray that you open our hearts, open our minds, Lord. Through you, show me wisdom, in the way that you have us to Lord. Lord, just ask you to bless all the team, Lord, as you teach us lessons. I pray God, you can know your Lord. Lord, just the soul of your word is bad, just follow you and move your message. All the things in Jesus' precious soul.
Okay, we're back in Daniel again today, chapter 6, page 71 of your Sunday School Quarterly. It's open here. When you study Daniel, there's a lot to absorb. He had just a unique life, didn't he? And God was with him through the whole way, obviously. He had this special ability to coexist with governments of foreign people. You know, he had positions in those governments. When you look at his duties he had with the Babylonians, and then now the Persians, where we're at today, he had that ability to work with all kinds of different people, but he never once compromised his principles all the while. Just a unique individual. But also, when you study Daniel, you see a history, if you will, of God's people. There's an account of the history of God's people. That we see that remnant, you know, that continued through Daniel. And also, there's a little bit of world history, ancient world history, when you think about the Babylonians and the Persians and their role in the world at that time, and it's documented. So it's pretty neat how God's Word and actual history kind of run together here for a little while. Does that just give you more confirmation about God's Word? It does me. It just kind of shores things up even more, I think. So Daniel, when you study Daniel, you get all that. For example, and some well-known Bible stories that we were taught since we were children, and we've already looked at a few of them are in this book. Remember the Daniel and his friends would not eat the king's meat. Remember that? That was our first lesson in Daniel. And so they went on and prospered. They graduated at the top of their class, and they were given positions. Then you had the Hebrew boys in the fiery furnace. We've heard that one for years. Last week, Mark taught on the writing of the wall. You know, that was another one from that we were well familiar with. So today, Daniel is over 80 years old, okay? And now he's working for the Persian government, okay? Our text, like is the case so many times, starts they skip a few verses. We're going to start at chapter 6, verse 11 as far as the text, but let's just review a little bit of things so we can kind of level set where we begin here following our Sunday school literature. So from last week, you remember, Daniel interprets the writing on the wall, okay, for Belshazzar the king. And that same night, the king was slain, remember? And the Babylonians were overtaken by the Persians. So again, God's hand at work in Daniel's life. The government he worked for has been overthrown, okay? But yet Daniel has a position with the new king, the new government. Even though Daniel was this high-ranking official with the Babylonians, Darius used him. Darius wanted him. This is God's hand at work, keeping that remnant in place, keeping Daniel protected. So it's pretty neat how God followed his life through all of this. Through the overtaking of the Babylonians, Daniel was not harmed. Matter of fact, he was admired, obviously. He was given a prominent position under this new regime. Darius will make Daniel one of the most powerful men in the kingdom. He had 3 presidents under him, and Daniel was one of them. He puts Daniel in one of those high-ranking positions. Daniel and the 3 presidents had 150 people under them. You know, you're looking at the government tree, the command, you know, the chain of command, if you will. Well, in of those people under Daniel, some of them were getting jealous. Okay, they saw how Daniel was this superstar, and that they were jealous of him. And so they decide to discredit Daniel in some ways. Is their goal, okay? So they attack his religion. That's how they're going to do it. But before they decided to attack his religion, they watched him. They spied on him. They tried to find fault in him. And not in our text, but verse 4 in the text said, quoted this, "There was no error found in him." Now, think about that witness, okay? They've been spying on him, trying to find something to hang on him. They couldn't find anything. And we think about the political, situation in America. That's constant. They're trying to find fault in the other side. They couldn't find anything. Couldn't find anything on Daniel. All right, so what they decide to do, they convinced the king. You know, king is full of pride, and this plays right into his pride. He doesn't think clearly. He doesn't think the consequences out. They go to the king and basically say, for 1 month, let's make a decree that nobody can worship. Now, they've seen Daniel praying. Let me go back up. They saw Daniel praying he had like a patio, maybe a big door that opened up from a room. It was visible. Daniel didn't do it to be seen. He just did his normal routine of prayer 3 times a day, and they saw this. So then that's when they conjured up the plan. They go back to the king, and they basically say, King, let's make a decree that for 30 days, nobody worships anybody but you, or anything but you, for 30 days. You have to worship the king. And so the king goes along with it. And so before the ink can even dry on the king's signature, the guys plotting against Daniel witness him again praying. And that's where our text will begin. So I just wanted to kind of take you up to that point so when we read this, we kind of know a little background of where we're at. So it's on page 71, Daniel 6. I'll read the first verse. You guys read after me. Then these men assembled and found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God.
Then they came near and spake before the king concerning the king's decree. Hast thou not signed a decree that every man that shall ask a petition of any god or man within 30 days, say of thee, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? The king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which altereth not.
Then we skip a few verses. We go to 16 here. Then the king commanded, and they brought Daniel and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee.
Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him.
Then the king arose very early in the morning and went into haste into the den of lions.
And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel. And the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God.
God, thou servest continually able to deliver thee from the lions.
Then said Daniel unto the king, O king, live forever.
My God has sent his angel, and has shut the lions' mouths, that they have not hurt me. For as much as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, have I done no hurt.
Then was the king exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. Amen. Okay, so let's go back to the beginning verse 11. As we talked about earlier, those conspiring against Daniel, they have patterned him. They're watching him. They know he prays 3 times a day. Daniel's on his own private property praying, but the way that the building was structured, they can see Daniel. They can see into Daniel's room, and they can see him pray. And I thought, Daniel doesn't really try to hide it, and he don't really do anything differently. Daniel didn't pray to be seen. Okay, that was not what Daniel done. Daniel prayed because prayer was important to him. Prayer was part of his daily routine, and he was just doing what he always done. And his consistent prayer life was vital. And shouldn't it be the same with us? It should be. So then verse 12, that's a very long verse there, but basically So they observe him. Daniel praying, they run to the king. They run to the king and remind the king of this new decree. They question him. In that verse, they kind of question the king, saying, is it not, did you not sign off on this? I'm just paraphrasing, and the king said, yes. All right. He said, yes, this is true, is the word that's in the verse that the king said. So these men are cunning, aren't they? Very cunning, and don't we see that in today's world? What will someone do to get a higher position in this world? Okay, it's just mind-boggling sometimes, isn't it? But anyway, they're very cunning, and they have successfully trapped Daniel with this plot, with this bogus law that they fooled the king into signing. But we're going to find out in some regards the king got trapped too. He was, now looking back on this now, the king realizes the error of his ways. So our text skips verses 13, 14, and 15. And I just want to read over them just really quick. And this is after our verse 12 that we read. And then answered they and said before the king, that Daniel, which of the children of captivity of Judah regardeth not thee. In other words, that Daniel does not regard your law or you, king, nor the decree that thou hast signed, but maketh his petition 3 times a day, meaning he's prays to his God 3 times a day. Then the king, when he heard these words, was sore displeased with himself. He knew at this point, they got me. And he feels bad for Daniel now. He feels bad that these guys plotted against him and Daniel in a way, because it hurts the king as well. He labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. In other words, he is like, well, how can I get out of this? How can we fix this? How can we reverse this? Is what the king's thinking. And then these men assembled unto the king and said unto the king, Now, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians is that no decree nor statute with the king established may be changed. In other words, they're throwing it right back at the king. Now, you can't change this once you've declared it. So, anyway, you can see the conundrum here. And then verse 16, the king says, Then the king, which we read, the king commanded, and they brought Daniel, it says, and cast him into the den of lions. Now the king spake and said unto Daniel, Thy God, whom thou servest continually, will deliver thee. So, any thoughts so far? Anybody got anything to add? You can see what's going on here. And those cunning, clever guys under Daniel have kind of put, obviously Daniel's in danger, but the king too has to feel like he's been tricked
It
now.
showed that the king really had a lot of respect, and he really had a lot of love for Daniel.
Yeah.
It's almost like he kind of knew in his heart that God was going to deliver Daniel.
Yeah.
I think he knew that kind of, he had done too.
Yeah. And the way these guys, they're in their cunning way, they even questioned the king and reminded the king, hey king, you know that you can't reverse this. I'm paraphrasing. This has to happen. So it's been made clear, in other words, and the law must be adhered to. Daniel is one of the 3 presidents under this king. He's important to the king. He's a valuable servant. He's depended on by the Persian government. But Darius has kind of painted himself into a corner now. He's got everybody watching him. And he has his own credibility now that he's got to try to uphold and be strong. So, but he has to go through with it. You know, you can tell he doesn't really want to, but he has to. He's kind of, it's his fault. He's put Daniel in this danger, so to speak. Really. And you know, you think Daniel, and think about Daniel's witness, Daniel's life that he's lived in front of this king. And I think that's why the king mentions here in verse 16, thy God, whom thou servest continually, he will deliver thee. This is the king telling Daniel. And I thought about that. You know, Daniel's life has made an impression on, Daniel's witness in his life has made an impression on this pagan king. He's starting to put the pieces together here. You know, he recognizes Daniel's God as being omnipotent, being powerful, and it's like being sovereign here. You can tell in those words. He has seen Daniel's faithfulness to Daniel's God. In other words, Daniel never compromised. You know, it was Daniel's faithfulness, in a sense. Remember, he prayed 3 times a day. That kind of got him into this situation with those that were plotting against him. So again, that's further proof of Daniel's faithfulness to this God. So Darius is putting all this together now, and he sees what's happening here. So Daniel's witness, Daniel's life is influencing this king. Think about that. There's seeds of faith being planted in the king based on just observing Daniel. And I think that's a key point in this lesson this morning. We're trying to find, when we read these lessons, these stories that we've heard all our lives, what are the tidbits of things that we can take from there? That's what we try to find, and I think that's one of them this morning that we're going to talk about. All right, verse 18. Then the king went to his palace and passed the night fasting. Neither were instruments of music brought before him, and his sleep went from him. So the king is struggling. Again, we go back to the point. He's miserable over this. It says he goes home in a more subdued manner. Apparently back then he liked to have the music playing and the band and all that. Not tonight. It says that there's no festivity. There's no music tonight. Apparently, I believe the king enjoyed these things in the evening, or it wouldn't have been mentioned in here, right? So, not tonight. Band, you're getting the night off. I got something on my mind I'm dealing with here. No festive occasion tonight. And it says his sleep went from him. He didn't sleep, did he? He is miserable over this. You know, you think about it, there's a little seeds of faith being planted in Darius because of what he said to Daniel when they took him to the lion's den. But I have to think tonight at home, he's beating himself up because he probably feels it's his fault that Daniel's in danger. That's, even though you might, you still, if you have faith, having faith, yes, but we still have a conscience, we still have feelings, don't we? And we're going to feel bad if something we done put someone else in danger. So I think that's what he's dealing with at home, and that's his struggle. This says in verse 19, then the king arose very, very early in the morning and went in haste into the den of lions. It says he rose and went in haste. He ran, didn't he, to the den. He ran to the den of lions. He's running to check on Daniel. It says he arose very early. Well, it was probably easy for him to rise early. He probably didn't sleep. He was looking forward to seeing Daniel. And when he came to the den, he cried with a lamentable voice unto Daniel, and the king spake and said to Daniel, O Daniel, servant of the living God,
is thy God, whom thou servest continually, able to deliver thee from the lions. It says there was lament in his voice. Again, he's sick over this. He feels bad. He's still upset. But the fact that he ran to the den and called for Daniel, what does that tell us? There was still hope, right? He's still holding on to that faith, that little bit of faith that he had. I believe that he still had hope, and he still, was holding on to that faith that Daniel's God would see him through. Because why else would he run? They've used this den of lions before, and it was pretty quick when they put somebody in that den. We're going to find that out too. It's not in our text, but we'll talk about that. So Darius saw Daniel's faith in his walk. Again, I think that's important. And Darius calls him a servant of the living God. So again, Daniel's faith, is so strong that it's influenced the king. I think that's a point we've said a couple times, but I think we need to be mindful of that. Darius may be a pagan, but Darius is a reasonable man, okay? Darius thinks things through. He has seen Daniel's faith, and he senses there's something real here, I believe. Darius does. Something is possible here. Otherwise, he wouldn't have ran to that den and called out. There was something there. He felt something real it could be possible that Daniel's God could deliver him. Any thoughts so far?
Tim, I just think, something there that about Daniel and his faith, before he had been thrown in the lion's den, you don't see anywhere in there where he was pleading for his life or, trying to get out of what he'd been trapped into. But I think that showed a lot on his part. And, we've seen the king trying to argue for him and encourage him in that situation. It's just kind of makes me think that Daniel had all the faith in the world that he was going to be fine.
And Darius saw that too, didn't he? And that just played into all this as well. That was another influence on him too, and anyone. Because most people would be pleading for their life if they knew they were facing a den of lions, hungry lions, for sure. Then Daniel said unto the king, O king, live forever. Imagine relief now that has come across to Darius when he heard Daniel's voice. And even Daniel's reply is respectful and polite. It was Daniel's way. Again, that was another thing we've seen from when Daniel was challenged in the past at other readings we've done on Daniel. He was always the polite, respectful person. He wasn't on a power trip, was he, in his positions or anything like that. So this polite greeting is as if he's saying to the king, "Oh, king, did you have a good night?" Well, we know the king didn't have a good night, did he? But we think Daniel probably slept pretty good, even around the lions. But Darius didn't. My God hath sent his angel, and hath shut the lions' mouths, and they have not hurt me, forasmuch as before him innocency was found in me, and also before thee, O king, I have done no hurt. So, now in verse 22 here, you see a similarity to a previous lesson of ours with the 3 Hebrew boys in the fiery furnace. Daniel says, my God sent his angel. Remember when Nebuchadnezzar looked into the furnace and he saw 4 people in the furnace. Not just the 3, but a 4th one. So we think about the person that accompanied Daniel there in the lion's den, God's angel, could that also have been Christ, pre-incarnate Christ? Maybe we can ask that one day. We've got a lot of things we'd like to ask, don't we?
So we think down here.
We ain't gonna forget them all.
And notice now Daniel takes the occasion here to send a little rebuke, if you will, back to the king. I have done no wrong before you. In other words, king, you all threw me in here and I've done nothing, you know. Yeah, he broke this silly little law, but did he really even know about it? I couldn't find anything where Daniel was aware. You know, I think they did all this behind his, without him knowing. But it doesn't matter. Daniel would have prayed 3 times. You know, that's kind of irrelevant whether Daniel knew or not. Daniel never compromised. He would have prayed like he always did. But he says, you know, King, I didn't do anything against you. You know, he didn't hurt the king. He didn't affect the king's best interest in no way. He didn't do anything against the government. Then the king, exceedingly glad for him, and commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. So Daniel was taken up of the den, and no manner of hurt was found upon him, because he believed in his God. So this mild rebuke, if you will, in verse 22, the king does not care about that. The king's not upset that Daniel questioned him in the previous verse about doing no harm against the king. Darius is overjoyed. Darius is simply overjoyed to hear Daniel's voice, period. And I thought, you know, we talked about it, Darius's concern was twofold. I think he had a great respect for the man Daniel and the government official and helper that Daniel was in that realm. But he also recognized that he was responsible to putting Daniel in that position and endangering him. So that was obviously, this is a huge relief to Darius to think about like that. So the law, he feels the law has been satisfied. The lions didn't hurt him, was taken up out of the den. And that's what they do. And says that they checked him out and there was no harm found in him. So, you know, it's an old story. We've an account of one of God's most faithful warriors, and we've known it, we've heard it for years. But what can we, out of this, what can we glean from it this morning that we can take away and we could apply to our lives? So, a couple things. Not in any particular order, but first thing here. If you and I were being spied on, would those looking to find fault in us, what would they find? You don't have to answer that, okay? But remember, they spied on him. They couldn't find anything. So what an example here Daniel is for us. His spies found nothing, right? Instead, they took his habitual prayer practices and twisted that around and used it against him, didn't they? Tried to. So, to be found guilty of faithfully worshiping and praying to the one who we serve, should we want to be like Daniel?
Yeah.
We should, shouldn't we? That was the only thing he was guilty of, if you want to call it that. But that's with their silly little plot and law that they enacted, that's what he was guilty of. Praying. Same God we serve, too. Think about that.
Kudos to Daniel, because it happens today. But when people lie on a Christian, we feel like in our prideful way we should show the integrity and bring out the truth, where he didn't fight all of that.
Yeah.
He just let things go as they was, and God come out the winner.
Yeah, amen, that's right.
It doesn't say in the lesson, but those people were punished, weren't they?
Oh, yeah,
They were thrown in the den, you know, I'm through with the lesson. I mean, that verse I think is left out, but they were actually punished for what they did.
they certainly were.
A lot of the lesson.
All the king, the king, this made him miserable, if you remember, for a night and part of a day. And when he put two and two together and then he knew why that law was enacted prior, was just to do this to Daniel. He did. He rounded up, it says he rounded up their wives, their children, and threw them all and said that the lions started eating them before they hit the ground inside the pit. Yeah.
God allowed all that to happen, didn't he?
Yeah, yeah.
That's something I can't understand, why the children had no part in
Well,
what.
they were still.
I know, they were
They
there.
were that seed of them.
True, that's true.
Yeah.
Didn't wanna leave no remnants, they've been.
That's evil. That's why God destroyed even children and everything, you know, because of that.
Well, if we remember, was it Saul that when he invaded a neighboring country, he was told to wipe out everybody, wasn't he? And he didn't do it, and God dealt with him, did it?
Yep. Right.
So also in this lesson is the importance of prayer. Plain and simple, I think. Who has blessed us with our provisions? Who has sustained us? Who sent his son for us? It's the same God that Daniel was praying to, right? On that day. That got him in trouble. So that same God that watched over him, we've studied Daniel's life now, last few weeks. The same God that's taken him from that young boy in captivity, pressed into service under the Babylonians, to now an 80-year-old man. That same God that watched it, that was over him in the lion's den, is the same God we serve.
Is that the same, is that still yet in the 70 year that they are being under captive?
This is towards the end of the captivity.
And I know the
Lois.
70 years they did.
Yeah, I think it's coming up soon, and the 70 years will be over, I believe, shortly after this, I think. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Daniel was committed to his God, his prayer life, and like his values from other lessons that we've studied. He didn't compromise on them, did he? Not at all. Can I improve my prayer life? Absolutely. When we all, Daniel is a good example there. And then, lastly, my last takeaway, I keep thinking about how the activities, the life, the faith of Daniel, how it was witnessed by Darius, and it changed him. Okay? So, does others and I thought of this, we don't practice faith to be seen. Okay? But do others see it? I thought of that. That's it right here in this lesson, in my mind. In other words, does others in your life see your faith in action? We don't do it.
Back into our Wednesday night. Show me my faith by my word.
Yep. There it is. That was Wednesday, wasn't it? You remember Darius ran to that lion's den. I just keep thinking about that. There was something starting to grow in Darius's heart. And he wouldn't have been that way if he hadn't witnessed Daniel's walk. Right? Something was there was a change occurring in that man. We may never have a testimony anything close to Daniel, okay? Let's face it. You think about what God done through him. But can God still use you and I?
Absolutely.
To influence others? Daniel's faith was seen by this king, and it influenced that king. It's not in our text, but further reading of Daniel, you'll find out that this king will honor God eventually. Okay? Daniel's faith has been seen by the king that has an influence on him. The God of Daniel, again, I keep saying it's our God too, right? The same God will be proclaimed across the kingdom by Darius right after this event. It's not in our text, but little excerpts of verses 25, 26, and 27. This is Darius' testimony. It's very clear. He says that he has seen the works of Daniel's God. He says he is a living God. He says, these are Darius' quotes, he's in his proclamation. His kingdom can never be destroyed. He delivers, Darius says that. He worketh signs and wonders. So, one man's faith turned the course of a people, a nation. At the time, the Persians this was the most powerful government entity that recorded. So, look what one man's faith did. One man's faith, Daniel's faith, look what it did to a whole people. So if God can do that with one man, what can he do with me? How can I, what can he do with you? How can you be can you, you might not be able to turn an entire kingdom, okay, with your witness. But what about a friend? What about a cousin? What about a coworker, a neighbor, a brother, a sister? Are those folks in our midst? They are, aren't they? So anyway, again, I go back to that. We don't practice faith to be seen, but do others see it. Think about that. Anybody got anything to add?
We think that we have to go up to someone like that and preach a sermon or make some big showy comment about God or our life, but that's really not how it is.
No.
I
Daniel,
know from my own experience of certain people that you watch their life and you see that in them and you want that. And what's a no preaching ceremony or no harsh words about how I should live or whatever, and it just influences you.
Yeah, that's right. Good point. You're right. Daniel interpreted dreams and had visions, but he never preached. It was his life, his witness. You're right. Look what it done. All right. Appreciate your all's attention, and look forward to